All right. Hello, everyone. It's been another thing that's been a long time going. Well, we talked about the modern ocean. Now we're talking about A Topiary. Kyle, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hey, glad to be back. It's Kyle Jonathan from the movie Sleuth, Shane Carruth cultist. So
Yeah, we're talking about we're talking about Shane Carruth, the other unmade film that he made, and I think my favorite thing he's done, or that I've encountered from him. Now, in
agreed.
terms of his actual movies that he made, I'm not entirely sure, but because I like both of them, you know.
Yeah,
Well,
for different reasons.
yeah. Though A Topiary is one of those. I'll kind of paraphrase something he said. It kind of broke my heart that he never got to make it. Because man, what a movie it was, or what it would have been. Yeah. So yeah, we're talking about Shane Carruth's A Topiary today, which should be fun. I'm looking forward to this, or I've been looking forward to this. How about you, Kyle?
Same here. Yep, good stuff.
Um, yeah. So, for some background, Shane Carruth, he came into the scene in 2004 with a time travel thriller called Primer, which is considered by many, including us, I would think, to be one of the best time travel films ever.
Absolutely. And if you tell
He,
me that you understood it the first time you watched it, you're lying.
I definitely didn't. I had to watch a couple of videos to be like, what? What are you talking about? Then 9 years went by and we were waiting for something else from this new talent. And then in 2013 he made Upstream Color, which I would say is less difficult than Primer in some ways, but it is just as befuddling in others.
Yep, my all-time favorite movie.
Oh, your all-time favorite movie?
All time. I love it to death.
Don't you have a car sticker that says Upstream Color
My
on it?
my license plate says Upstream Color.
Your license plate.
Yep.
Oh man.
And
I haven't gotten to that, but yeah, there's a certain quality to Shane stuff that really gets you really hooked. Well, if you're the right person, I love the way he uses science fiction tropes in his movies, or in the stuff that he does anyway. Like for instance, I always like to say, maybe Primer is the most realistic time travel film I've ever seen. Excuse me, real quick. What do you think about that?
absolutely.
Like, from what little science I've read, they've said that time travel is pretty much probably not going to happen. But if it did happen, I would imagine what happened in Primer would be very similar. Just like two
Yes.
guys discovering it in their garage, and they end up just dicking around with it.
Yes. That's kind of his MO is he takes really high concept stuff and then tries to filter it through a lens of reality. Like I guess I would equate it with kind of like how Nolan and Reeves Batman, like if this was real, it's kind of similar except for Carruth is to his detriment sometimes the smartest guy in the room, and he doesn't really care if you get it or not.
Yeah. But it turns out that he wasn't just twiddling his thumbs for 9 years. He actually was trying to make another movie called A Topiary, which was supposed to be his follow-up to Primer, and oh boy, what a follow-up it would have been. Primer was made with $7,000, which that is chump change compared to movie budgets, as I like to say. Then he's like, hey, I'm going to make this crazy-ass, basically art house Spielberg movie with with $20 million. Hey, Hollywood, come take it. And Hollywood was like, what the hell is this? This is like a...
Yeah,
I hate to say
he's.
it. I think it was kind of doomed from the start, if I might.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. He actually started. He was asking for 50, and
50? Oh my
yeah,
god,
and
dude.
over the years he kept whittling it down and shoestring everything he could. Soderbergh was on board to back
Uh-huh.
him.
Think David Fincher
Um,
was as well.
Fincher, yep, and then he got it all the way down to 15 million, and that was basically like the least that he could do everything he wanted to do with the effects, with the choruses and all that stuff that we will
Mm-hmm.
talk about in a bit. But and basically the combination of the fact that the script is so esoteric and opaque and difficult to get.
I remember
Um,
somebody compared it to 2001, and which is kind of funny because it has that same structure of 2001.
Very much so.
That but it's basically Spielberg meets Kubrick with like a weird art house crap in the middle. Makes it extra spicy. That's how I like to think of A Topiary.
Yes,
But
absolutely. That's the perfect description.
um, I ended up discovering it. I'm like, oh wow, he didn't. There was a one he didn't get to make. I'm curious to see how this will go. And when I read it and encountered it for the first time, I was just completely blown away by the balls of the script and just how he was really going for it. Though again, I think considering, I think it was kind of doomed from the start because I mean, like A Topiary. If you really want to be realistic about, I would build towards an A Topiary if I were a filmmaker. You know.
Yeah, I think it's just it's a combination of a lot of things. He's difficult to work with. He wants to be in complete control. He would never surrender any part of his vision. So, and that hurts when you don't really have the rep to pull that off, especially in the early kind of right as like superhero films were starting to really take control of studio funding and backing. But now if this had like if he had been born or been a director in the 70s,
Maybe. Yeah.
maybe
But
that
even
probably would have
Kubrick
been.
had to kind of work up to 2001. Is kind of how I think of it.
Sure, but I mean, you look at like A New Hope,
Yeah.
like
Like if he were in like Spielberg's like apex in the '80s, I'm sure that would have been right up next to something like E.T. or The Goonies.
and people would have hated it, which is okay. It's okay, that's
Yeah, it would have been a cult movie for sure. This definitely has the trackings of a cult movie. But yeah, Shane wanted control of the movie. He wasn't gonna budge on it. He didn't want, like, if I remember right, I did, because I went down the rabbit hole. If you couldn't tell, uh, that makes me sound really sad. But I went down the rabbit hole. He apparently didn't. He wanted to make it himself, which that's one. I'm like, okay, that's gonna kill it dead in the water right there. He even had his own special effects, which in Upstream Color, as Kyle mentioned to me, you'll even see some test footage he had for it because Amy Semetz's character is like a graphic designer of some sort.
that's right. That's
Before
right.
the thief, starts doing his thing. Yeah, so you'll see some of the test footage. He's put out some like test images, and it just, man, really makes me sad that he never got to make it, because A Topiary is probably one of the most audacious science fiction movies never made. Like, it's my Jodorowsky's Dune. Like, it is a movie I am dying to see. Like, I would love to see it, but it's probably not going to happen, and it makes me really sad.
Yeah, I think the only way we're going to see it at this point is if he inherits a bunch of money, or if he gets desperate enough to sell this, sell the property, which I don't know psychologically if he's capable of that. But I just think right now this is the perfect climate for this, because a streaming platform would pick it up, no problem. No problem.
Yeah, but knowing how much like how Shane likes to really
Control.
He really yeah, I don't think he'd do it, but
He'd have to get desperate enough and like need the money kind of thing. So.
Yeah, no. But I am glad that he was selfless enough to let us at least read the script. I'll give him that.
Absolutely.
So we can enjoy it in the mind, if you will. Though sometimes it can be hard because it was supposed to be a very visual movie, which we'll get into. But yeah. Blurb thoughts. What do you think? Like, I know you love Upstream Color, but what do you think of A Topiary, Kyle? I'll let you go first.
I think it's basically, I think at it, like, distilled down, like, at the heart of it, it's basically talking about how, like, our rush to create things without questioning them will, ultimately be our downfall.
That's
I think
interesting.
that's it at its core.
I would like to talk more about that when we get to the kind of questions we have about the narrative and
Sure, but overall,
like what
I
we
just
think it's about, type of thing.
yeah, I think it's just a fascinating screenplay that is a great example of show don't tell.
Oh yeah, I mean, a lot of the stuff in this, I'm like, what the fuck is he talking about? Because
Yeah, I mean, just
I'm
minimal dialogue.
I would probably be one of those idiots in the fucking place making the apologue because I would just have to know what it is because that's who I am at my core. That's why I'm a journalist. That's why I'm pursuing a journalism degree.
Yep, absolutely. I think it's about curiosity, but I think without getting too much into it because we're going to discuss it, but like I think the choice of the group being all boys is very important.
Yeah, I one of the things I would have like if I gave like writing advice to I mean I just know from watching a bunch, but I'd be like I probably wouldn't have 10 boys. Maybe like 5 or 6.
Well,
if it were me. Now he'd probably tell me no and flip me off and get mad, but
there's a reason for that though. Just like for example, all of the boys, all of their names have 6 letters.
Well, yeah, no, I get there's a reason. I'm just saying, like, if I were like,
Oh yeah, I mean, if the studio
I were
got,
giving advice to him on how to market it, I'd be like, yeah, I'd probably have like, less boys. But I understand there's a reason. I'm not,
Yeah, I think he's just trying to say that like historically, males, tend to seek power without thinking through.
Yeah, it's interesting. I love it. I love how it takes that because I have a bit of a because there's I guess I'm just young enough where I appreciate that kind of kids on bikes type of story because it really at its best really it captures what it's like to be a kid, and people are always like chasing that when you get older. It's like, oh man, it's being a kid was actually not too bad, and those type of stories really appeal to those people, and I guess I'm one of those people because I just graduated high school not too long ago. I mean, I remember, so I remember what it's like kind of goofing off with your friends, going off into the woods or walking around the neighborhood, just goofing off. And I think that's why we were talking earlier. I'm like, I think that's why part 2 is my favorite of the like 2 halves because I like it captures what it's like being a kid goofing off with just stuff,
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why Stranger Things is so popular. I mean, it's it's part of our cultural subconscious. But I like how, in typical Carruth fashion, there's a kind of danger to it.
Yeah, there's a twist, which I don't want to get too deeply into it yet. But
yeah, but there's a danger there, almost like Lord of the Flies, and I appreciate that. And
you've seen the like little mock trailer he made, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's sort of his ironic love letter to stuff like the Goonies or E.T.
Hmm.
and stuff like that. I mean, the first half is basically Close Encounters of the Third Kind on acid. I mean, come on.
Yeah, yeah.
Guy gets obsessed with this thing, drives him insane. He has to know what it is, and it's not as whimsical as Spielberg
No,
is.
it's
He
very clinical. It's very
he's Spielberg's a very whimsical man.
he is, and
And
there's always a softness there, even at his darkest.
which is why
Spielberg.
I like Spielberg, because he does
Yeah.
have that deep humanity in his work. But
Whereas Carruth, it's all clinical. It's like doing laser surgery. Like,
yeah, no.
yeah.
I think it's funny how none of the relationships in Act One work, but I'm getting ahead of myself. But yeah, I wanted to kind of keep this structured, But so Blurb thoughts you really enjoy A Topiary?
Yeah. I think it would have probably been my favorite out of all of his stuff.
Oh my gosh, and the thing that makes it that kind of sucks. Like I think they could have made it. Like Modern Ocean, fuck that. I don't think they were gonna make it. But A Topiary, I'm like, maybe they could have, but he'd had to work for it, which I don't think he wanted to.
Correct. Yeah, I agree. Modern Ocean would have taken like a Marvel level budget to pull something like that off. That's just it's just not going to happen today. If it's not, if there was a superhero in the Modern Ocean, maybe. maybe somebody would have jumped on board. But I do seriously think that if it ever is going to happen now, if the landscape kind of stays the way it is, it's going to be a streaming platform that's going to pick it up. I think that's the only way that it ever gets made. And
Yeah, but like with A Topiary, I'm yeah, I could definitely I think they could have made it if he had been more patient. I think maybe he could have made it. Like if he had done like Upstream Color, kind of some other kind of littler movies, and then he kind of built up towards. But again, that's just going off of just how I think the Hollywood system works, and from what I've heard from people I've known. I mean, I don't know how Shane thinks. He's a very mysterious individual. He doesn't talk too much about his life, aside from some stuff that's happened, which I'm not talking about here.
Right.
But yes, what's interesting about this movie is that there's two acts to them. One it was supposed to take about maybe like 30 minutes.
Yeah. In the script, he talks a lot about how he breaks some narrative conventions.
Yeah.
So normally like a page in a script is like 1 minute. In this, it's like 30 seconds, and the movie would be like, I think somebody did the count, but it would be almost 3 hours long. And so the first act would be probably like 30 to 45 minutes, depending on changes and stuff like that. And then the bulk of the narrative, the 2 hours, is the kids.
But yeah, there's two acts. One is about a guy called Acre Stowe, who in the script I imagine Shane himself playing him because he loves putting himself in his movies.
Definitely Acre.
I mean, I don't think it's for like ego reasons. I think I've seen interviews where he's just like it's easier, So I mean, I don't think it's like an ego thing. Maybe a little bit, but I don't. He's very economical. You could tell from like Primer or Upstream Color, he's very economical with his resources. So better to cast yourself and save some money.
Exactly.
Yeah. Or that's the impression I've gotten from like the interviews that he's given. But anyway, so kind of to give a summary, Act 1 is about a guy called Acre Stowe who ends up discovering this strange thing has been going on that has to do with this highway. And I won't go too much into it, but it basically he basically loses his mind as he starts to descend into figuring out what this thing is. And like I said, I see Shane himself playing that role. Like, come on.
Yep.
Either him or the guy who played Abe in Primer.
Yeah. And it essentially involves like patterns of light that are identified as glints.
Uh-huh.
And then Acre, as he goes further down this rabbit hole, it's almost kind of like a conspiracy theory.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
Yeah. He meets a woman named Amanda. They end up finding some people, and there's some interesting stuff that happens. Act 2 has to do with a bunch of kids, a bunch of boys, led by a guy named Euclid. But, I don't want to get too much into it. They end up finding this machine, which they end up creating this kind of weird wildlife with. But, again, I don't want to get too much into it. But yeah, you have any thoughts before we really dive into it? Because I wrote notes down for just.
Not really. I think that one doesn't work without the other. I think the first time you kind of approach it, it's very strange, but then as you see the connections as as the story unfolds, it really makes a lot more sense. I just remember the first time I read it, how captivated I was by the mystery, because
Yeah, me
I
too.
want, I want to know. I want to know what's going on. And then it's like he kind of tricks you a little bit, and and you're kind of like, wait a minute, what? And then
Stuff with
before you know,
math and the golden ratio, you're like, what?
right? And then by the time you figure it out, it's too late, and you're trapped.
Yeah.
So I really liked the way that he chose to do the narrative quite a
Yeah,
bit.
no, I think it's a really interesting storytelling tool, and I'm like, why did he I don't know of many movies that have acts in that way, and then I just thought oh, 2001 has that, because I saw some people comparing it to 2001, and I was like, what? It's more like a Spielberg, and then I thought about it, I'm like, oh yeah, it is kind of that, that. The structure's similar anyway.
The structure, and it's got some pretty heavy ideas. I
Also,
mean,
there's apes in the second act, which I'm like, oh yeah, 2001 reference right there. Or if not, that's a funny coincidence. But
yeah.
again, don't want to get ahead of myself. Yeah, I got notes because I'm like, I don't know if I can remember all the terminology and the character. So to keep it simple for myself, I just kept the names of all the important characters, and just the objects that are in this movie, and the stuff Spectrum, the glints, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm like, I'm not gonna remember all this. So yeah, Act 1. I know you said this was your favorite part of the script movie. Why? Why is that?
Because it's so mysterious. I I like how very much in the same vein as Primer, there's that kind of almost malevolent undercurrent to everything.
Mm.
Like his obsession, of course, is, meant to be like kind of put you at pause, but it's like you just,
Yeah, it's like Close Encounters.
yeah, exactly. Like that something bad is going to happen, basically, for lack of it. And it's like I love the way that the fall. I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but like in the narrative, in the first act, like we kind of talked about it, like Acre and Amanda kind of meet a. It's not like a cult. It's more like a knitting circle of people who fellow
I
like
kind of
UF,
view it is a little culty, but yeah, I
a
get what you're
little.
meaning.
It's more like people like that, like all that believe in UFOs and like come together and like search for them. That would be like the easiest way to describe it. It's like kind of a cult, but not really. But the way that he does it with the dialogue and the body language and the blocking of the shots and how you can see how it's gonna go bad, like almost from the jump, is just really ingenious to me.
Yeah, I mean, like if I thought about the first act is the story of Acre. Again, I imagine Shane playing the role because I don't know, just it feels right to me. Amanda, I see Amy Semetz because
not anymore.
well,
But
not
yeah.
anymore, but I just it's just kind of. Carol, I also just wrote Carol because he's probably like the most important at all the cultists.
Oh yeah.
I would say, or I say cultists. It sounds bad, but I imagine like a Stephen Root playing him or something like that. I don't know. Or do you think he's too slimy? Because
I mean,
he's in Barry.
yeah,
So
Barry. Yeah, I know. I was just thinking about Barry. Yeah, maybe. Uh, I think I feel bad because I know we talked about him for Modern Ocean, but Brian Cox
Brian Cox, yeah,
would,
he might be too
like,
sinister though, because he always plays like just assholes. I was watching Succession. I'm like, this seems appropriate for him.
yeah. Well, I mean, he was uh, Mel Gibson's uncle or whatever in Braveheart. He
Oh
wasn't
yeah,
a
that's
bad
true.
guy.
Yeah, that's true. He
So,
was pretty good in
um,
that.
but no, I think about like him just in like kind of like the mentor role, but
Yeah.
I mean, they're also never identify. I don't think it's been a minute, but I don't think he ever identifies races
No, I don't. I don't think so.
at all,
No.
even for the children. So, you could even have like
Keith David.
no, I was thinking Andre Brower, the
The guy
captain
is that the
from
guy from Brooklyn 90.
Brooklyn. Yeah, yeah, the captain.
Yeah, the captain. Yeah, he was
Yeah,
in
yeah,
Homicide, wasn't he?
Homicide. Yep, Frank
I still need
Hamilton.
to
Yeah.
watch that, but I
Oh,
know he's in
it's
that.
amazing. But yeah, like but I mean, there's as long I just see Carol as being kind of like a mentor, kind of like a leader,
Yeah.
charismatic. But he's also not. He's just as obsessed as Acre is.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
But he's not really the evil one, so to speak.
No, there is another thing later. Again, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but the movie starts with a car accident that kills a whole family, which you're just like, oh, geez, that would be a very jarring start. You're like, oh wow, this is gonna be something. And just the way he describes it, I'm like really interested in how he would have done it, because it reminds me of the Children of Men scene, when they're in the car. And it kind of makes
I
me think of
thought the exact. It's funny you
same
say
thing.
that. Yeah, I thought the exact. It's really funny that you say that. Yeah, and I think it's meant to be jarring, but it's meant to also symbolize, in my opinion, sacrifice, because without their deaths,
The plot wouldn't be set into motion.
what happens wouldn't happen, and that's part of the big, heavy idea of the entire story, is that maybe we're not in control of everything.
Yeah, that is a motif I noticed, because, like, again, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I've read a couple of interpretations, and one's about, like, determinism and are we really in control, but, I don't...
Right, or is it just a complete illusion of control? And so to me, just based on Carruth's kind of outlook, I think he's trying to say, like, like, every great discovery, was predicated upon by blood, by the death of people. And it dovetails quite a bit with, without jumping too far ahead, but the name of the most advanced, chorus, Oppenheimer.
Oh shit! Yeah, that's right. Okay,
We're
getting ahead of
So, I'm
we meet
death.
Acre. We meet Acre Stowe, who is a lobbyist of some sort. That's how I view him anyway. He works in politics, or he works at a transportation agency, doesn't he?
I believe he works for the city. He's
works for the city.
He's like a traffic. I forget the term because it's Carruth, but basically like a civil engineer with respect to like traffic routes.
Yeah, and one day his boss is like, "Hey, Acre, we want to know this road shit that I can't think of because I'm just not as smart as Carruth, and plus I don't have as much life experience as he does. Figure out where there's been all these accidents. Could you figure out, where it's coming from?" And he's like, "Yeah, whatever." Does the results, and it turns out it has to do with this intersection. And he's like, "Oh, awesome! I thought it was gonna be like, this like mountain or something. It's gonna be harder than than just this road right here." So I think it's the same road where the family died, right?
Yes.
That's right. So, he's like, and he brings it, and they're like, "What the hell? Like, is this right?" And he's like, "Yeah, that's what I got." And he's like, "Do it again." So he's like, "Fuck." Does it again, gets the same results. And he's just like, "What the fuck?" And he gives it back, and he's like, "Dude, I don't know what to tell you. Like, you know, it's I don't know what to tell you. It's right there, and they're like, fuck it, just fake the results. Like, they're not gonna like the higher ups won't like it for whatever reason. But by the time he does that, Acre becomes just fucking. He just becomes obsessed with it. He just, he's like, why did it keep, why did it keep showing up to this at this very location? And he starts hatching up some schemes to figure it out. He digs up part of the road illegally, I might add, to see if he can find a connection, but he can't. Kyle, thoughts?
Yeah. And it's almost like a little bit of a detective thing, because he at one point he's talking to the proprietor of a sandwich shop that overlooks the overlooks the intersection, and he's questioning the guy about how long have you been here, that kind of thing, trying to see if anybody else is noticing the phenomenon. And that eventually leads him to he basically tries to extrapolate, because there was 5 people in the one car and 3 people in the other car, and that's when he creates the sunburst, which is essentially the first glint, which is the first time that he witnesses the phenomenon.
So one day he's become so obsessed with it, he gets a job to where he can overlook the highway. He can overlook the intersection so he can, see what's going on. And one day he's, doing something. He sees a helicopter fly overhead, and the glare from the sun hits his eye, and he's blinking it out, and I hate when that happens.
Right.
And then that's when we end up discovering something which Carruth calls the spectrum. Which are kind of like when the sun glares in your eyes and there's a pattern. It's there's a circle and some squiggly lines. I'm just this is, I'm oh, okay. Kyle?
Yeah. And that's when the door opens to this entire world, wouldn't be the right term, but
this
essentially
whole mystery.
Yeah, and he's created his own kind of physics, his own math, his own astronomy, to explain essentially why certain things happen the way they do around the world. And so it's very Lovecraftian almost.
I was gonna say that at
yeah, it's very Lovecraftian in that normal man gets exposed to basically
eldritch strange stuff,
right? or to use a Clive Barker term, the great and secret show, right? What's really going on behind.
Yeah, except it's more science fiction-y in this. So then Acre decides to enlist the help of his ex-girlfriend, and I think it's funny when he's like, we keep fight every time we hang out, we're always fighting. Okay, so don't bring up any bullshit. He's like, all right, I promise. 5 minutes later, they're arguing.
Yeah, that's actually one of my yet another reason why I love the first act. So I love that scene because it's so natural when you're with an ex partner like that, how you just slip right back into and this is this is why we're not together anymore, and it's funny because he starts the conversation with the roommate,
Amanda, and then Amanda, or does he meet Amanda later?
No, with Amanda. Yeah, he starts with her, and then it goes to the ex, but then it goes back. But then then the next scene, Amanda's in the car, which is hilarious to me. I laugh every time I read that. It just cracks me up because that's a very just very funny little subtle note to that.
But yeah, I just thought that was funny. It's okay, we're not gonna argue. Okay, we're gonna be adults. And Acre's like, hey, fine by me. 5 minutes later, they're bickering about something. And it's just ugh. But he ends up hitting on her roommate, who's this woman named Amanda. And they slowly become an item as the thing moves along. They even get married by the time the end, and then they start getting involved in this. And she's like, "Oh, hey, this thing is, hey, this thing is, oh, dang it, Kyle." How would you describe it? They kind of start going on wacky misadventures to figure out what this thing is.
Yeah, well, and that's what like leads, like, it's so dense. I might be messing up, but like, isn't it like that's what eventually leads them to Carol and the other people? Is like with the whole thing with the bucket.
Yeah. And then they end up finding this group of people, and they're like, "Who the hell is this?" You know, like, I've never seen these people in my life. It's led by this, and it's led by this guy called Carol. Sorry, Kyle, I didn't mean to interrupt.
And it is very cult-like in this particular thing because they have created their own scientific explanations for all this. Poems, and the bifurcation, and the what is it? The
apologue.
Yeah, the apologue. Yeah, like all these like weird scientific things that like don't really, it's like doesn't really make any sense. I don't think it's supposed to make any sense really. What is of import is that they all believe it.
Yes.
And then Acre and Amanda are drawn in to this like global kind of.
Have you ever read Naoki Urasawa before? Like, do you read manga or comics very much?
Not much. I mean, I've read some, but I don't think I've read any of them.
Okay, it kind of reminded me of I've not read it yet, but it reminds me of the concept of 20th Century Boys, because the concept of that is that it's these childhood friends who discovered this symbol they used when they were a kid is being used by a cult now. And it reminded me it reminded me of that.
Gonna make a note. That sounds right up my alley.
Yeah, no, it's I haven't read it, but I've heard it's very good. It's very kind of bendy. It reminded me of that a little bit. Just this whole global thing, like, you know, they end up creating this stuff. They have these things called the poems, and the poems end up creating the apologue, and the apologue's like this. I don't even know what it's supposed to look like.
It's kind of like a telescope.
Yes.
I believe he describes it like a large kind of like a Hubble kind of apparatus that they create. But it doesn't even really matter. Like, that's one of the things that I think is important to stress if you decide to take this journey, whoever, you know, if you're listening and you want to read this, it doesn't really matter. What matters is where are they getting these ideas from?
Yeah.
How do they know what to create? How do the patterns lead them to these specific places to get these specific sounds and these specific patterns? And to what end, you know,
he
are
even
they
learns like birds, like there's some shit with birds. You're like, what?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then they get into the whole with the amber fluid and the thermoses.
Yeah, and they're like looking up at the stars, and it like shoots down.
Well, and then they create like the different almost like maps within the amber liquid, and they filter it through the machine.
Yeah.
You know? And the whole point of it is that it's leading them to like these different places and these different discoveries, and ultimately greed is what undoes them.
Yeah, they definitely I like some of the ones who almost approach it like a religious experience almost. Now Acre is not one of them. He's just kind of like, I just want to see what's going on. I just want to know, if you understand me. And there's some people who are more like, you know, kind of like this is like a sign from God, or I think there's even a quote in there where it's like it's a sign from God. I don't remember, but
yes, absolutely. It is definitely spiritual to many of the cult.
And, you know, Acre's just kind of like, I don't know. I just want to know what this is. Like, that's his whole thing. And I think even Carol, I don't know if he really thinks it's spiritual. He just wants to know what it is.
He just wants to know. And I think that is very symbolic of just humanity's kind of innate curiosity. You know.
Yeah, which is I think one of the key themes of the film. But I again don't want to get ahead of myself. So Acre, Amanda, and Carol end up going on this huge excursion around the world, around the planet, where they end up finding all these signals, these patterns, these shapes that they keep making into something else until one day Acre he can't take it anymore. He just is like, I'm done with this. I can't do this anymore.
Right, and that's also after a moment of violence with the one gentleman with the gun.
Oh yeah.
Demand, and at that point they've had their first child, and so his instincts as a father kind of like snapping back, and then the narrative really jumps around. Like he really plays a lot with time throughout this whole thing.
Yeah.
Both acts throughout the whole movie.
Would be just, oh my gosh, he would just be.
Yeah. But it jumps quite a bit actually after.
Yeah, I think like 10 years or so.
Yeah, like he just said, I believe though it just describes him as looking older, but he's like a councilman, he's a politician.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then Carol shows back up.
I do think it's interesting how Acre can't handle his relationships. Like, him and that ex-girlfriend don't get along. Then by the time the time jump, him and Amanda aren't getting along. The marriage is falling apart at that point. I don't know if that's some sort of commentary, like, since they don't have the thing that bonded them in the first place, it's kind of starting to split them apart once they've gone away from it.
I think you hit the nail on the head. I think that's precisely it. Because, so Carol shows back up, and he's like, we figured out some stuff. But ultimately, they haven't figured out anything, and he's basically just trying to like get him back into it again. and which made me laugh. Like I was like, but the important part, and like probably why I love the first act so much, is how it ends, the final sequence where he comes home, and it's very clear that Amanda is basically thinking of leaving him.
Yeah.
And she's going through mementos, and she has all of these Polaroids they took,
which forms a pattern.
Yes.
Yet another one.
And she points to basically the glint pattern is
this is one of my favorite scenes, by the way.
Yeah, it actually my jaw dropped. Yeah. And so ultimately they basically start taking the Polaroids and like putting them together, and they realize that all of the Polaroids and the glints are creating an image.
Yes. And it's like I love that scene because like they're actually like getting along again, and they're like
because what brought them together is back.
Yeah,
and they remember that purpose,
and they're like sharing like warm memories, and they're just kind of reminiscing together, and it's like really nice. And then they complete it, and I'll let you take this.
And then like as they complete it, they kind of look disappointed, like they were expecting something different. But what they're looking at is literally a picture of themselves looking at the pictures, looking at the pattern, which forms a forest, which then transitions into the second act.
Indeed. Mm-hmm.
And so you as the viewer are left with so many questions. I mean, you're still left with them when the movie ends, but the point is this is now a different time, a different place. And now we have these 10 boy characters, and we have no idea what happened to Acre and Amanda. We have no idea what happened to Carol and his group. Did they succeed? If they did, what did they find?
And you did say there was infighting in the group. I always forget about this part, but you do remember that there was like infighting. There was infighting in the group.
Yeah, I mean that's what leads to the guy trying to like take the thermoses from Acre.
Yeah.
Because even Carol's like, "What are you doing?" He's like trying to break it up or whatever, and the guy like pulls the gun and he's like shooting at the ground. So yeah, oh no, there's lots of infighting because some people thought it was spiritual, some people thought it was scientific, some people wanted to give up, some people keep going, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the infighting is very important for what eventually comes around.
So with Act 1, so yeah, that's your favorite scene. I know that's your favorite scene when they look at the mosaic and Acre's just like, it's a dead end.
Right, but actually, it's but actually, it's not. It's a doorway into the rest of the story, and clearly, we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but as you find out within the second act, it wasn't a dead end.
But yes, but yeah, Act 1. I don't want to get through it too quickly because there is a lot of meat to talk about. For instance, like why, like again, like you said, so many questions by the end of the first act. Like, what are these glints? Why? What does the epilogue do? What is its purpose?
Right.
Why are all these people? There's some people, like, if I remember, there's a line in the script where someone stole something, or did they steal something?
Which part?
I think, if I remember, Carol was like, yeah, there have been people who've been kind of fighting, and he's like, oh, he took it from you, right? And he just kind of smiles at him.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, people steal, but yes, without getting too much into it, because I'll go into why that's important. But yes, there are certain elements of their science, of their topiary, if you will, that are stolen by other people.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't want to get too much into it, but I'm like, yo, why a topiary? And then I was looking later. Some of the phrases are planting terms and gardening terms.
Yes, and if you think of a topiary as the bushes are shaped like animals,
mm-hmm.
and then you think about the different, I'm being very vague, but the different groups and what each group is doing and creating.
Mm-hmm.
They're creating,
uh-huh.
and then if you take a step back from that, the big reveal at the end is,
it's
many topiaries.
But yeah, no, what's interesting, they bring up the golden ratio. Now, I am a dummy when it comes to math, so I had no idea what the golden ratio was. I don't know what your skill set at math is.
Not good.
You're not.
I'd have to. Yeah.
So I was just like, what? The golden ratio? What? What is this? They're making like patterns out of like. That's what threw me. So I'm like, so what are they making? Is it an image? Do all of those pictures create an image?
I mean, my theory is that they ultimately they create the maker.
Oh. Well, hold that thought. I wanna, like I said, I wanna talk about like unanswered questions and like theme stuff.
And we're also never told, so I could be wrong, but like my belief is that what's happening with Acre is in the past from the boys, and that ultimately what that group does is, and what the all of their different science stuff and everything, what it leads them to is essentially the maker.
Yeah. So then we get into Act 2, which takes up the rest of which would have taken about somewhere between 2 hours.
Yeah, 90 to 2 hours, yeah.
And we meet 10 boys, who I will name here. So there you go. We meet Euclid, Carter, Albert, Javier, George, Graham, Samuel, Marcus, Vaughn, and Hector. Now, I should note, when I first read this, I thought, okay, who the hell names their kid Euclid? Unless you're like some weird hippie, or you're Shane Carruth and you're just some like brilliant guy who's like, I'm gonna get cutesy and name my kid Euclid. They're all named after scientists and mathematicians. Euclid was a Greek mathematician, if I remember right.
I believe so, yeah.
Euclidean geometry is named after him. Albert, of course. The others, I don't know who they're referenced to, because I'm not a science geek. I love science fiction, but science is not my...
Right. We write and we watch movies. We don't get into all that math stuff. We're different kind of nerds. Different nerds.
Yeah, when at the end I'm just like, good lord, Shane is like a bigger nerd than I am. I don't know any of this. But
Gigantic.
yes, we meet these 10 boys. Euclid, Carter, and Albert, I think, are the ones who find the Maker. They find this thing called the Maker, which is like this black kind of box. And if I remember right, they say it's man-made. So somebody made this.
Which is where my theory comes from. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I love Act 2. Like I said, it's my favorite because I think it encapsulates what the movie's trying to say. But at the same time, it's like you said before, it's such a cool twist on the Goonies, E.T. kind of story. Or Stranger Things kind of story, if you want to go, like, right now. It kind of takes that kids discover weird thing in woods and kind of tilts it on its ear a little bit and makes it into a much more, like, sinister thing.
Very much so.
Which I find, that's really what blew me away about this. It's just, like, I never thought of it like that. It's I don't want to say it's a more cynical take, but it's certainly a darker take on that concept.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's again why I go back to why why he chose males, or boys, for this specifically, is because they luck out, so to speak, for a lot of it. Like, a lot of it is just experimentation, blind luck, ingenuity, but because they're young little boys, they are just curious, but they don't stop to say, is this dangerous?
Exactly. Yes.
They're more like, what can we do next? And that's really...
But at the same time, like, there's, like, a lot of... I love the, like... Shane Carruth really captured that feeling, of kids just goofing off and hanging out. What it's like to be a kid, I say.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of it is just them with, nothing really important going on, nothing really important to say, and they're just enamored with this, and they all have their various friendships that eventually become a little tribalized, right? There's some line drawn between the boys.
Yeah, like Euclid and Carter are close. Albert and damn it.
Is it? I know Marcus is like the big one who like kind of turns his back on the group or whatever, but.
I know it's basically Albert versus Euclid as it kind of becomes more hostile, but
oh, that's right, Albert. I'm mixing them up. Yep,
Euclid,
you're right.
It's Euclid who finds the Maker, and he's like, oh yeah, it's oh look, here's this thing we found in the woods. It's I don't know what it is, but and then he starts playing with it, which is one thing. I'm like, these kids are really. They're way smarter than... like, these kids are like 10, 11. Some of them are even like 7. I'm like, dude, like, these are very, like... these are, like, really... It's kind of like how I was with Pyram in our Modern Ocean chat. Like, it does stretch my suspension of disbelief a little bit. I'm not saying they can't do it. Like, kids are smart, for sure, but, like...
So, I agree with you, but part of the reason why it didn't bother me as much is that because I don't think he gives like a specific time for the boys.
I wouldn't say it bothers me. It just kind of, it's something that kind of poked at me as I was going through it.
In my mind, there's been because like
maybe have them be a little older if it were more believable to me.
But see if they were older, I think that's specifically why he made them so young, because young boys, they want to play with their friends, they want to explore and experiment. They aren't thinking about girls. Or
that's true.
Or boys, whatever their preference, But like my point is like the hormones aren't raging yet, so and innocence is very important to this, right? Like innocence plays like a very big part in really all of Act 2. If they weren't innocent, I don't,
you don't
they
think
may
it would
have
work?
Right, because they're I mean, we're building up to like the big reveal, but like, I don't think they would have been tricked.
Oh. Yeah. Yeah, no. Yeah, no, I agree, but it's it's just something that kind of like not really, you know.
But I also
I don't
think
call
like,
it a problem. It's just something that kind of bugged me.
It's interesting, yeah.
It kind
But
of
also
bugged me a little bit as it's kind of like how Pyram's just like a freaking maniac throughout the entirety.
right.
I'm like, this kid's
Modern
14. Like,
right.
dude, it stretches my.
Well, I think part of that is probably Carruth because he's a very smart guy. That's probably how he felt as a kid. Like he was the smartest person. You know what I mean? So that's him blowing off steam. But also, I think with respect to the kids in this, we don't get a specific year for the kids.
Yeah,
I think.
exactly.
And so I think it's beyond us. I think it's a little bit further in the future.
Really, that's interesting. I kind of thought it was somewhere in like the past or something.
No,
maybe like the 90s or 2000s, like early 2000s.
So I will put a pin in that only because I don't want to explain it until we get to the part with the apes.
Okay,
shall we say?
all right.
Because it'll when I tell you my theory, it'll make sense. You might not agree with it, but it'll make sense with what my theory is.
Okay. So let's before we get too much into the mind bendy stuff. So they find this thing, and being boys, they're like, hey, let's play with this thing, because, you know, why not? They have this, like, little construction area that they basically just it's kind of their own little world, basically. And again, it's kind of like I have this, like, little woods area behind my house, and my friends and I, when we were younger, we would hang out there. It made me think of that. So, nostalgia, a little bit, but, you know, it just made me think of that. And I just love them just goofing off and figuring out how this stuff works.
And, like, just... I don't think we should get too deep into the science of it because it won't make any sense. It'll take forever. But just for those of you listening, like the basic, very simple description of this is that this box creates these like white discs.
Yeah.
That
it shits out these little things. They're called funnels.
Yeah, and because they expand like in a funnel, like almost to like a cylinder, and then they can connect them to other ones, which, long story short, these kids essentially create AI life. I don't even know if we're meant to know, but it's like
animals.
Because that's what little boys would create. That's another very big thing, you know. So they're like you know, they're like,
if they were teenagers, they make like a lady or something,
right, or like a sex toy or something, you know. But
oh my God.
But yeah, you know, I mean, right, but you know, but the point is, it's very childlike in their presentation.
Yeah.
And that is again part of the danger, because there's very real danger with these things because they have their own
Now
goals.
Some might go, these kids are playing with this thing, but like at the same time that's what kids do, because, you know, they don't think about that stuff, you know. It's
exactly.
like...
and it's a cool secret. It's making cool stuff. They start almost creating like a
little currency.
Yeah, like an economy.
Yeah.
to control the maker, to control the box, to control how many funnels they'll make. It's almost like trading baseball cards.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, that's what I thought of a lot about it. Mm-hmm. So these kids have this miraculous machine that are making children's, you know, toys, that they start realizing, oh wait, these things can do our chores for us, essentially. Not in their house, you know, not in their house, like not clean their room type thing, but like we can have it dig, because
they have like a lawn business that they
and we can have it like dig up stuff for us and like get more stuff to make more funnels and blah, 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 you know, and it just spins out of control.
Exactly.
Completely.
And it goes disastrously, as you would imagine.
Well, and part of that is again why I firmly support him doing all men.
I'm not, like,
you know.
Let me clarify. I am not against them being little boys. It just stretches my suspension of disbelief.
Oh, sure, and it would never happen in a, you know, in a studio environment. But I get the choice that he made. Is that, you know, men are inherently kind of greedy and they want to be in control all the time, and they start keeping secrets from one another.
Yeah.
And then they start forming these almost like Lord of the Rings. It doesn't get to that level of violence. Lord of the Flies. Sorry, Lord of the Rings. But it doesn't get to that level of like violence and savagery. But there are like
I didn't even think
philosophical.
about Lord of the Flies. I just been like, yo, this is crazy. I was thinking like
It,
Goonies gone wrong, you know?
but there is like a philosophical difference, right, between how some of
Yeah,
them
like
believe.
Euclid is more cautious in nature. He's more like he's clearly the smartest out of all of them. He's clearly who they look up to as kind of the leader of sorts.
Yes.
Like Carter is clear. Like Carter's like a year older than him, and he's always like asking him for advice, and he's just like, I don't know, dude. Like,
Yep.
and
And so that dueling philosophy is what leads to kind of the schism between the
Albert
boys.
is more reckless with it, if I remember.
And
right.
I feel like Marcus is in there too. I need to look because that is a big thing. I feel like it was
like there's other stuff called funnels. There's a controller. There's pedals, choruses, which are the like monsters, but we'll get to that. So they basically figure out how it works.
It's Marcus and Javier.
Marcus and Javier, who do what?
Yeah, that kind of split off, I believe. If I'm looking at like a kind of like step-by-step plot summary because there was so much for me to try. I feel like it's I feel like Marcus was definitely one of the big ones. But anyways, it doesn't necessarily matter. But Marcus and Javier is the one group, and then the other group is Carter, Euclid, Graham, Vaughn, and George. And then like Albert's kind of like doing his own mad scientist thing.
Yeah.
I
like how they use the funnels to like shoot stuff off. Like they'll put like dirt in there and it,
Yeah, or they figure out that it can break open anything that it's placed between.
Yeah, or when they
expands.
start like, or like there's one scene I thought was funny. They break it, and they all lose their hearing. And it leads to some funny scenes. Like his mom starts like yelling at one of them, and he's like, "Huh? What? What is this?" Like
which is why they develop. Which also, by the way, ties very importantly into my theory. When they discover the flower cutting.
I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. So.
Yeah, but all that like ties into like very specifically like the climax of the story.
Yeah, so okay. It's been a minute. Well, I was kind of researching my notes a little bit yesterday, but I was kind of busy. So they make the funnels first, and they figure out that you can stack them. You can kind of throw them like frisbees. They're kind of like muffins. They rise up after a little bit, and then they can like decay. Or am I getting ahead of myself?
Nope, you're good.
Then they end up finding something called the controller. No. Ah, man. When is it that they create the animals?
Euclid makes it out of the box.
Yeah.
I don't remember like where specifically, but it's like after they figure out the fronds and all that, and it's like the flower.
Fronds, yeah.
Yeah.
So they end up learning how to use it, and they kind of start creating this little currency. They trade it for money, and they, they're just kind of, they're goofing off with it, and they kind of, they use dirt, shoot it up. They, what else did they do? They do eventually create, like, an animal out of it. One of the boys, if I remember right, I think it's Euclid, gives one of them to a girl. One of the fronds.
Olivia,
yes. Is it Euclid? I think it was Euclid.
I believe so. It's been a second, but I believe so, yeah.
He gives it to her. They kind of start messing off with it a little bit. But then, the maker runs out of... turns out the maker is a finite resource. And the boys start to kind of worry, like, oh shit, what are we going to do? What's the fucking fuel source of this thing? There's a funny scene where one of them tries to put cereal in as the fuel source.
Yep.
Albert, if I remember right, is the one who figures out what the fuel source is. but he won't tell anybody because they start splintering. It's probably some details I'm missing.
Which is also very much a dovetail with the cult from Act 1.
Yeah, because they were fighting too.
and they were withholding secrets and stealing from each other, and it's very... Carruth loves those patterns.
Like Javier ends up discovering you can make an arm out of one of them. I think that's when they make the
flower. Yeah, because the fingers is because it starts with like the 8 fingers, and then they are trying to figure out how to like cut it down, but they're worried they're gonna go deaf.
Yeah. Like one of them has I think he puts it on his arm and demonstrates to the other guys. It reminds me a lot of Primer, how Abe and Aaron start to turn on each other once the time travel gets out of control.
Which is the best part of Primer. I love that. I love it. I love how that movie is like, and now you're in a horror movie right now.
They're like gassing themselves, and like Abe is traumatized by it. It's crazy. But yeah, it very much reminds me of that in Primer when they start turning on each other.
Yep.
Are there details I'm missing you would like to fill in?
No, I think you got like I said, it's been a minute since I've read the whole thing, but I mean, like, and I think honestly we should leave the specifics to like people to explore. But,
okay.
But the high point of it is exactly what you're saying, which is they start turning on each other. They're trying to figure out the fuel source. They make these discoveries where they can they essentially figure out how they can destroy the disc, the funnels.
Oh yeah.
Without,
I forgot to mention there's this pit that they have. It's like a bottomless pit. Probably not
like
really.
like a sinkhole.
Like a sinkhole, yeah, but probably not really. But they just like throw all the stuff they don't need away. I forgot to mention that. That's a big thing later. Then, I think that's when they create the creatures called choruses. Which you can see footage of it. They are basically like these. They're basically like those robot dogs from.
Yes.
From Black Hammer.
But they use like crates as like the torso.
Yeah.
To create the skeletal frame for them.
But the thing like can't like move properly, so they end up I think that's what the pedals are for. They end up putting the pedals on, and that's how they balance themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, being boys, they start playing with it. Without really thinking, this is weird. We should probably not do this.
That's right.
What kids do.
we've created a life form, and turns out it has its own agenda. But it's interesting because it's not overtly...
Well, yeah, it's just like they're playing with it at first, like
yeah. Well, but even the course itself, it's not like it's overtly like some murder machine.
No, it's very much that going back to what you were saying, that Lovecraftian thing. But that's a little later on, though.
Right, it has an agenda that we can't comprehend, but it also is almost just like a machine in that it performs a function.
Yeah. They also learn that it does perform a function which they call farming, where it just kind of gets down and just like kaplunks on the ground and like leaves patterns or whatever. Maybe not patterns. That's probably not the right. But they leave these things. I think that's what the fronds are, right?
Right. I believe so.
And yeah. And
so all of this keeps building until tragedy.
Exactly. This ends up building until, of course, it blows up in their face, and they start to get scared. Like Javier, like breaks his arm trying to say no, because like they do have a intelligence.
There's a whole thing about that with the command words. And because like they start like recording his voice because like it only listens to the one that made it or whatever, and that's like a whole big. I remember that just popped right back into my head. I didn't even thought about that because like I think it's Marcus or Javier, one of the two. It like is commanding it, and then the other kids start like making voice recordings because they realize it'll only listen to like that kind of voice, so then they're able to control it too.
Yeah.
Which is another very ingenious thing kids would do, you know?
Yeah. Javier tries to command it. He gets his arm broken, and now the boys are like, "Shit, this is getting out of control." Then, one of those big hunkers walks over to find. I think it was Olivia's house.
Yep, it's Olivia.
To find the funnel. I think that Euclid had given her. And unfortunately, while trying to grab it with no regard for her safety, she dies. And everyone is just completely devastated by what happened.
Yep. And they dismantle that particular chorus.
Yeah, they dismantle it, and they're like, fuck it. No more. We're not doing this. But of course.
Yep.
It's actually a very sad scene. It's very well blocked, I think, because Euclid goes over. He's like, "Oh, what's wrong?" And they're like, "Ouch."
Yeah. Yep. And then that kind of essentially, and like the thing is, this is a very slow film. So like we're going fast because we can't talk all night. I mean, we could talk all night, but I got other things to do. But you know, this is like building and building and building, and that's kind of like the first climax is like Olivia's death, because that's when it's like, oh, this is real. Like this
we
is
might have made a mistake playing with these things,
you know, and eventually it builds to where these other choruses appear.
I think you're getting a little ahead. Because that's when I do think, like, at first Euclid's like, okay, it's done, and then they start making more because Albert starts making one without their knowledge, and Carter's like, well, fuck this, we got to do our own thing,
right?
But
don't.
That what you were saying? I thought you were at the part with the apes.
Well, no, I was talking about the apes, but you're right. But like the apes show up significantly, because remember, there's like a whole where like they're using their arms. And all, like, they don't, it doesn't immediately lead to what we're trying to hide. It's like the apes are just there, and like they don't know why.
Oh,
like,
yeah, that's right.
They just like, and they just kind of accept.
Up one day.
Yeah,
like, oh, hey,
yeah.
What's up? What's this?
Yeah,
because them.
Right, like because they're kids, so they don't think like, oh my god, this is danger. What made these? We didn't make these things. They just instead they're like, look at how different they are, and they have cool little arms, and they like take off the ape's arms and like put it on the other choruses and stuff. There's like a whole, you know, and this is again kind of how they get drawn back in, because they are making their own things, and then you know these other, you know, I can't remember how they explain it away. Like if they think like maybe like they made themselves, or I don't know, but like there's a significant amount of time with the apes before it gets wild.
Crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we're gonna make our own thing, and then Carter's like, oh shit. I think they even hide like a frond, a Chekhov's frond, if you want to say, and they hide it, and I think Euclid even gets drawn in. He's like, fuck this, and then he gets going.
Yep.
But yeah, they start playing with the apes, and they're drawn back into the web of the thing, of the choruses.
The maker.
Of the maker,
yep.
Yes. And then it gets even crazier. So, yeah. I think they make it. They start competing with each other. They make like a horse.
Mm-hmm.
I think Albert's the one who makes the dragon. They make a dragon. I know they make a dragon somewhere in this part of the movie.
Yes. The dragon is very key.
And then, that's when we get to the climax of the movie.
I can't remember how they... Is it that the apes lead them to the camp? I can't remember that part. Like how...
I don't remember it very well either, but I remember that... Dang it.
I'm trying to look through this little thing. I think it's actually Carter is the one that draws the little symbols in the ground.
Uh-huh.
To like it, because so like they eventually like find that there's a camp.
Yeah.
like
Yes.
near them, like
Yes.
very close to them. And I'm going to get a little into my theory now because it's very important that it's adults, it's
Yes.
grown-ups,
Mm-hmm.
and they're the ones that have created the apes.
Yes.
Which means a couple of things. Number one, they have their own maker. Number two, an interesting part is that they're all deaf.
Yes. I think one of the boys even permanently goes deaf.
Yes. But it's interesting because it means that the adults didn't have the ingenuity or they didn't care to figure out a way around the ear problem.
Yeah, if I remember, I think like they say later on, he goes, like, how come we were smart enough to figure this stuff out and they weren't?
Yes. And so my theory is that those people are essentially the descendants of the cult.
Interesting.
And that effectively they are the ones that create the makers.
Mm-hmm.
And then a splinter group, perhaps Acre, we'll never know, basically stole one and then hid it, and that's what the kids find.
Mm-hmm.
That's my theory, is that they eventually do succeed in creating the maker.
Well, yeah, like I said, that I kind of want to save that for the for like interpretations and like questions we have, like if that's okay.
Sure.
I see what you're getting at. So the adults are all deaf, so they're like, well, shit. Turns out they're not very friendly.
Correct.
And they even attack the boys, and they're like, well, shit. All right, this is not gonna work. So they go, okay, guys, we're gonna have to work together on this. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, Euclid has visions, or he bites one of the like little pieces of the machine, and like starts seeing stuff. That's like for later. Like I said, you didn't want to get too much into details because that would just drive us crazy. But so basically, they all make up and they end up fighting against the adults in a pretty surprisingly very dark battle. People die. I think some of the boys die. I forget who.
So some of the boys die in an explosion because there's the black. I forget what it's called. The black. Oh god, the black spheres.
Yeah.
That with the chorus and so like what happens is they tunnel to get like kind of like into the camp.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like full on war but it's like they're fighting via proxy. Mm-hmm. Where like their choruses are fighting the adult apes.
Yeah.
And because they're kids, they went with overkill instead of strength.
Yeah.
And so, you know,
and like they're all like traumatized, like, well, we didn't want to kill people, you know?
Right, and the chorus is just obliterate everyone, and they try and blow it up to like stop it. Some of the kids basically have to sacrifice themselves.
Like there's like a really touching scene, like one of the, like two of the boys like hug.
Yeah,
I forget exactly the context of it, but it was like a really touching moment.
Yep, and they bring and they have the dragon at this point, which is also terrifying. So
and they just curb smack the adults basically.
Yeah, it's shockingly kind of violent, not like gore or anything like that, but just it's very like brutal. It's very very and that was the death of Olivia was foreshadowing this is what they will do.
Oh.
They serve this purpose.
Yeah.
And then I mean that's basically it other than the finale.
So then after that battle, there's some time later where the boys just for whatever reason decide to go into the forest and basically become like Lord of the Flies basically.
Yes.
Which also I'm like, what happened? No cops? Like the cops weren't like, where the hell are my kids? Where are the parents? But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm going on a tangent. But they end up making it. It's still like they basically get a stupid amount of funnels they don't know what to do with. So they just let them farm and whatever funnels they don't need, they get rid of them. Then Albert, earlier in the movie, Euclid had these visions, and he was like writing stuff in his blood. Well,
on the cup, yeah, that's right.
Cup, yeah.
Yep.
And Albert ends up seeing, basically at the end of the movie, the choruses everywhere, all over the universe. That's the end of the movie. Which, that's when it was like, mic drop. I was like, oh shit, this is what kind of movie it is. Oh my god, you know, I was like, oh my lord, dude, oh, you know.
Yep. Yeah, my take is that the very end with the Lord of the Rings stuff is that that's sometime in the future, not a long time, but that essentially they've taken over the choruses. But the boys are, I don't know if I'd use the word spared, but just they survive because of the command words and like they, you know what I mean? It's like they kind of know, and so they create their own tribe, but they like make, you know, offerings to the dragon and all that kind of stuff. So yeah. And that's kind of how it ends, where it's like you get this kind of like this macro kind of like it pulls back and you see all these different galaxies and planets and universes all completely overrun with the choruses, the creations.
Yeah, and I totally forgot, like one's called Oppenheimer.
Yep. Exactly.
And that is it. Now we can get into like questions we have and what we think this movie's about. So I'll ask you first. What do you think this film's about?
I think it's very much about the price of discovery. Okay. I think it's about the price of discovery. I think it's about how before you know it, you're too deep into it and the trap is already shut, you know. You get blinded by ambition, or you get blinded by curiosity, or but in this context, I think he's saying that discovery is so dangerous and so powerful that even something as innocent as 10 boys, right, could still, harness this terrible power, and so you have to respect it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, because I did like a little, I kind of wrote down, just kind of like keep it in my mind. But yeah, it's basically it's to me about how, I think what makes this so sinister to me, I don't want to say it scared me, but more or less it haunted me. That's a good term for it.
Very much so.
That we were the instigators of our own doom. These aliens didn't have to invade us. They just had to trick us into making it their own invasion force, pretty much, or whatever this thing was. Reminded me a lot of, if you remember, you've seen the original Twilight Zone, I hope?
The film or the series?
The series.
Yeah.
You've seen the Monsters Are Due on Maple Street?
Monsters Are Due, yeah, I was just about to say, yeah.
Yeah. Great minds think alike. But, it's that. It's that. Like, that's the first thing, like, I think of. Like, they don't need to invade us, because we're just so good at doing that ourselves, you know? I think I agree, that's what A Topiary is sort of about, to me.
Absolutely.
The price of gaining that, it's almost Lovecraftian, like you said earlier in that. It's about the people trifling with things that are best left alone.
Yes, and I think it's also about how having I don't know if I'd say like Messiah complex is the right word, but like hubris, essentially.
Yeah.
Like the hubris of mankind, and how Acre and Carol and all those people thought they were basically, they never say it really, but they thought they were chosen. Yeah. Right? Like they thought it was some big like divine or cosmic like mission where no, you're being manipulated. That's it. You're being led to this. From the second those two cars hit and killed those families, Acre was set on a path.
Mm-hmm. But I've heard other interpretations, like, it's about determinism, it's about God, but to keep it very simple, it's very much that idea of these things basically tricking us into dooming ourselves.
Absolutely.
That's really what I think it is.
Absolutely.
So,
no argument.
Yeah, I still have some questions, though, like, like, why were there all the car accidents? Like, what did that part have to do? Like, you already kind of talked about it, but like, what did that have to do with the movie? Like,
I think what he's, I think, okay. Well, first of all, I would just remember that the entire reason that Shane Carruth became a film writer is he was in a near fatal car accident.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I think that's part of it. I think that's why he chose that. I don't think it matters like what it is. Like you have to think about it like this.
Put it
like,
there for a reason. Like, come on.
Oh well, right. Well, but what I'm trying to say is this: like, pretend that Acre doesn't exist for a second, and like we don't get his story. We could have gotten Carol's story.
Uh-huh.
We could have like the point is there's something that each of the people in those cults experience to make them discover the pattern.
Uh-huh.
It just happened to be for Acre. It was car accidents because that's what he did for a living.
Mm-hmm.
That you know. I bet you if we found out that Carol was a baker, that he would see some pattern in the things he bakes or whatever. So I think it was more like a slice of life.
Yeah.
And he just chose the car accident thing because it's close to his heart.
We kind of talked about this a little bit, but what connects the two acts together aside from the strange objects and choruses and all that?
I mean, like my theory is 100% that I think that the deaf adults are the cult or like their descendants.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they succeed. I think they are the ones who created the makers. And then I think just as because history repeats itself, I think they have their own splinter because I believe they even hint in some conversation with the adults that there is another faction that they're at war with, and that's why they're seeking this because they're trying to like take them out.
And they found the
or at
kids.
least right. So that's how I think they're linked. I mean,
which kind of leads to another question. Why were they there? Why do you think they were there? Think they were following the patterns and it just happened to be where the kids were, or was there something else? I don't know.
My suspicion is that their own choruses, their own apes, probably were innately drawn to other alien. Because how else would the choruses be able to take over every planet? They'd have to be coordinated. So my suspicion is the choruses themselves probably see patterns just like the cultist people, just like Acre, and they were drawn and kind of led them to where the other.
They're just as manipulated as we are? Is that what you're positing?
I mean, they're definitely tools, but I mean, if you think about it in the, but if you think about it in the, in the context of they didn't show up until they started making their own choruses. So it's kind of like if to use, I can't believe I'm using a Marvelism, but in the Avengers where they're talking about why they were making the weapons, the phase 2 or whatever, and it's like, well, it was symbolizing that we're ready for a higher form of war. And I think it's very similar with once the boys crossed over and they actually made life and they started farming, and I think that may have triggered.
I was curious if like Olivia's death like made it in the news somehow, and maybe they were like
also very possible, but they could
were like ooh.
Right, but they could have also been manipulated by the aliens, the creators of all this stuff.
It is. What was that collage they made? That mosaic is what they call it in the movie. Like what was we've talked about it a little bit before. You said it was a warning. I would like to hear you expand your thoughts on that.
I think it's a warning in that it shows it's Acre and Amanda like looking at them, like looking at the forest where the kids are.
Yeah. That's
why I believe Acre and Amanda stole the maker, and that's why they hide it in the woods for the kids to find.
So you think that it what connects them together? You think that Acre and Amanda are the ones who put the maker
absolutely
in the forest? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. Or if not them, somebody in their camp that they tell, hey, we had this vision. There's this, this forest. They were trying to tell us, I think this will be a safe place where we can hide this thing.
What do you think the apolog's purpose was?
Man, honestly, I don't know. I have absolutely no idea. It gets a little too heady for me with some of the math and stuff, and I'm just like,
No, I get you.
I
get you.
I mean, do you have a theory?
I would guess it's some. I guess I'm thinking it like it led to how they made the maker.
Yeah. Okay. That's perfect. That's
the best I could do because I'm like I don't know what the hell.
Yeah, like because no, you're right because it's almost like a universal translator, right?
Yeah.
Like it's translating, so like maybe it eventually downloads the instructions, and that's what leads them to we can make this thing, and then because they're greedy cultists, they're like we should make more than one. That's a great idea.
Things, But that's what makes it like that's what blew me away about it. It's like oh man, like it's just like they use our most prized attribute.
What makes us human?
Our curiosity. I'm just like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna go sit down and like look at the sky for a little bit.
It's like with the Oppenheimer thing. It's like, in order to end this terrible war, I have to create a terrible thing, right? And so we end the war, and then what do? Let's make more.
Oh my god,
that's a great idea.
Yeah, I know.
And it's and that's I think that's a big part of like what he's saying.
Which is why I'm just like, good lord, nukes. Why? It's just
which I think is a huge part of the entire point.
What do you
story.
think happened to Amanda and Acre after Act 1? No, I get it's not explained, so it's just personal theory.
My personal theory is that they. My theory is that they don't rejoin the group.
You don't think so?
I don't think so. I think more like they kind of do their own thing and keep tabs on it, and then once they realize what they've created, they steal it.
Interesting.
Because there has to be some explanation for how this thing ends up in the hands of the kids. And like maybe they hide it and they're killed. Maybe their bodies are dumped down that hole.
Ooh. I didn't even think of that. Yeah.
But somebody had to leave it there for some reason.
Where do you think the maker came from? I think I have an idea. I think maybe some of the cultists made it. Somebody in that cult made it.
Absolutely, with the machine. Yeah.
With the machine. Yeah.
With the Apper.
I'm guessing you would agree with me on that.
Yeah, 100%. The cult made it. Absolutely.
Yeah, because they say like if I remember somewhere they're like it's man-made. Someone made this, but who?
Yeah.
Absolutely
the cult. 100.
What were the point of the visions that like Euclid and Albert had when they bit into the was it part of the spectrum? Was it part of the glints? Was it another pattern?
I think it's yes, but at its basic level, I think it's the programming of the choruses. It's almost like the DNA of the alien race, because my theory is it's like evil alien overlords that that essentially like treat us like a zoo, right? Like a topiary. We're all just each planet is like a little garden, and so whatever design, whatever created it, whatever force created it, I think that it's philosophy, its nature, is basically hardwired into the discs, into the funnels, into the choruses. And so when they bit into it, they're getting basically keyed into that frequency.
Huh. Interesting.
Kind of like, did you ever see Slither? Did you ever see that movie? The horror movie?
Yeah.
Yeah. When the when the girl's in the bathtub and one of the slugs tries to get in her mouth and she bites down, and then she's immediately taken into their mindset and she sees what they did to an alien planet.
God, that movie is just
Yeah,
I like James Gunn, but man, it's a fucking weird ass movie.
Yeah, it is, but that specific scene is what I thought of immediately when they bit into the thing. Is very
Been
similar,
a
kind
while
of.
since I saw it, but I remember I'm just like, yo, this is kind of dumb.
There's also a very similar scene in John Carpenter's Ghost of Mars, also a terrible movie that I love, but it's
I mean, it's
you know
Carpenter, man.
you, you
What
know
do you
you
want?
know
He's
where one of the ghosts possesses the heroine, and she has a vision of like what the ghost did. Like I think that's what that is like it's kind of like the human being like communing a little bit, but not being able. Eldritch, Lovecraft.
yeah, it's also like sad when he bites into it and Carter dies. Like it's a really sad. He tries to move him, but he can't, and it's just like, that
Yep.
was the big tear jerker.
Innocence lost right there.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's the death of innocence right there.
Yep.
What does the ending mean? I have my own interpretation, but I wanted to hear yours first before I said anything.
My theory is that the topiary is these makers, is these boxes, is these people on every single planet in every single universe that is basically wiping out all existence by making their own little gardens. But as you draw back, everything is just a garden for whatever created these things in the first place. And it's just they're taking over the universe. And that's the topiary for the alien overlord or God, whatever you want to call it, whatever cosmic force you want to.
Yeah, no, I agree. Mine was basically his mic drop, like, this is what they were doing the whole time,
Absolutely.
They were tricking us into destroying ourselves, and that was the mic drop for me. I'm like, shit! Ran out of the house. I had to go tell everyone. That's what I thought. That's what I thought the ending meant. It was like,
Absolutely.
this is what they're doing, and good job, guys. You just destroyed yourselves.
100. I agree.
You were talking about something I wanted to wrap up before we, kind of,
Sure.
discuss our final thoughts on this. But you mentioned something about the boys. Oh, dang it! What were they doing? It was connecting to Act 1, and I can't remember what it was. Or there was like a reason there were the 10 boys. Like there was a reason that they were all.
Because all their names have 6 letters.
Uh huh.
So it's hexagonal.
Uh-huh.
Kind of like the petals.
Oh. So many
and
little
so
details, man.
yeah,
Oh
and if you I'm sure there's probably some mathematical thing about like 6 times 10 and 60 or something. There it's all symmetrical. Everything's symmetrical. There's 10 boys. They break into certain camps. They're kind of paired up. Each name has 6 letters exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Which is weird. I mean, it's definitely with intent. There's no way he did not do that on purpose.
I would agree, because, well, you were saying like it doesn't really matter about the car accident, but I was kind of like, dude, like everyone I've met is like every scene in like a movie or a show or a game or whatever, like it has to have a purpose. So that's why.
I don't mean like it didn't matter. Like in the what I meant is that he just like it's mattered because.
Device.
Right, because Acre is the lens through which you're seeing it, so it had to be a car accident. But if it was a different character with a different profession, it would have been something different. I think he just specifically chose the car accident as a framing device because of what happened to him, and because he himself is a civil engineer.
Mm-hmm.
So he just knows that stuff. Like that's what he did before he was in the car accident.
Yeah, I mean, my theory about but yeah, I think the people made the maker. Like that's the only thing that makes sense to me.
Absolutely, which is why I think that the aperture or whatever it is,
the epilogue,
epilogue, basically gave them the specs like you said. But then I think ultimately they fell apart again, just like they did in the past, and it created like
that's just human nature. Everyone always bickers.
and greed. I mean, power.
And greed. Yeah.
Once
you said something in the Modern Ocean discussion we had about people having things they shouldn't have, and then other people coveting it.
Yes.
Which then was made the Hannibal jokes, but Uh,
But yeah, very much,
idiots.
very much. Well, and it dovetails with the boys, because what he's trying to say there is look at this cult of people, right? That fall apart with greed and jealousy and all this kind of stuff, and they're like grown-ups.
Yeah.
And the exact same thing happens with these innocent young boys who have no reason to feel this way, but because that's human nature.
Yeah.
And it's the fractures and everything. And the only reason the boys win, and I use win lightly,
Like,
is
what did they win though? You
is
know,
you well they won the apocalypse. They won ending humanity. But the only reason they win is because their childlike imaginations allowed them to approach the situation in a way that the grown-ups wouldn't expect.
Mm-hmm.
But if you think about it, like, let's say the grown-ups had won,
Mm-hmm.
it'd still be the same ending.
Yeah, it's a very morose ending. You know.
Yes, very much so. I mean, they literally wipe out humanity, and
You think that's
have
what
to.
happened? You think they didn't just so that's one thing. That's another thing. I'm like, so do you think like an apocalypse happened? Do you think like do you think that they just decided to just go away into the forest?
I mean, it may not have happened. The vibe that I got when I read it was that it has happened, but it may not have happened. But if you take it in context with the great reveal at the end with all the different planets, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So either it's already happened or it will. It doesn't necessarily matter. It's more just like the floodgate is open now. Now they're out in the universe. Now they're free.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it really matters, but that's just kind of,
Nah, definitely. I mean, that's just personal preference. My take on it was because they go so like Lord of the Flies with it, with like the tribal stuff and with the dragon and all that, is that's how they're surviving.
mm-hmm.
While other people are just
Like, what the
being
hell is this? Yeah.
right and just getting throttled and you know
I don't know why they
and
can't
then
just, like, blow them up.
well, because they would all go deaf.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I forgot
So
all about that.
so I'm sure the first time somebody an army guy throws a grenade at one, it's not a great day.
Yeah.
um so yeah.
Damn it, you were saying something that connected the two. It's gonna drive me insane until I go back to the footage but yeah, no, really my interpretation of A Topiary is about one of Shane's favorite themes, people trifling with things they probably shouldn't be, and ultimately paying the price for doing it.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of really, A Topiary is probably like his most massive exploration of that.
Agreed.
Where he's like, okay, be careful when you deal with these things, Oh yeah, I think it was when we were talking about them being older, and just kind of our not really, like, again, I don't mind that they're boys. Like, it makes sense in terms of the narrative because they're just innocent kids. They don't know what the hell they're doing, right? It was like there is a part of me that's like maybe they should have been older. It would have like made more sense. I don't know. Well, like, you're kind of were like, well, yada yada. But sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No. I mean, yeah, I just think if they were older, like teenage stuff would come into it. And I don't think he was interested really. Like the closest of a relationship drama you get is Euclid and Olivia. And I think he wasn't interested in that. I think very specifically he's trying to, and plus, I think teenagers
would be more reckless with it.
I think more reckless, but not as stupid, for lack of. I know that like I'm not saying the boys are stupid, but it's like they just do stuff like you said
not as naive.
To play with it, right? It's the naivety that is preyed upon. Whereas like teenagers, like they would have immediately stopped after the Olivia thing. That would have been it.
But then maybe someone else would have found it.
Well, sure, but I think that's part of. But also, if you get into like determination, all that kind of stuff, if it's truly being driven by an alien intelligence or a cosmic deity or whatever, this was the path it chose.
Indeed. But yeah, no, I agree with what you're saying. It's just, it kind of, I don't know. just the ingenuity that they have. It's just kind of, now I get they're just bored kids, you know, they have nothing better to do with their time, so, you know, we're gonna mess with this thing, see what it does. But, you know, it's like, it just kind of bugged me a little bit. Is all I was.
Sure.
That was
Oh yeah, they're definitely way smarter than they should be. No argument.
Exactly. That's it. I'm like, these kids are way smarter than I was when I was 10.
But that's him saying I was a genius when I was 10.
That's him going, oh, I'm a genius.
Very much so. Very
Rubbing
much
it in. Rub it in, why don't you?
Very much so.
But final thoughts on A Topiary. This was fun.
Yeah, that was. I think it would have been amazing. I still, like I said, I'm still hoping we somehow get it. But I think it's a very powerful, very difficult film that I think would really bother a lot of people, to be completely honest.
Oh, dude, like, I'm not even, like, playing around. Like, I'm saying this without irony. This would be up there with, like, 2001.
Absolutely. Or Stalker. Or Solaris. Yeah, like, it is.
What are some other great sci-fi films? I can't think. 12 Monkeys, you know, or...
It's very heavy, very, very high thought.
Yes.
Very, very high thought.
Hell, I even compare it to, like, Arthur C. Clarke, you know, because...
Absolutely. I
need to read some more Clarke, but if you've read, like, Childhood's End, very similar in, like, aliens, not necessarily trick humanity, but how humanity's nature ends up destroying itself.
Yeah, I also got some, like, even, like, Ender's Game vibe to it.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of Ender's Game, but
I'm not a huge fan of it either, or the author, but I'm just the idea of, like, kids being manipulated.
Yeah, no, it's no, I just thought it was kind of dumb. I mean, the twist was neat, but it was just kind of like, you know, it's basically like proto-divergent kind of angsty teen bullshit. I'm like, I'm not interested.
Exactly, but just the idea of how easily they can be manipulated.
Or, you know, but, like, that's not the type of sci-fi I enjoy. That's pretty much what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, me neither.
A Topiary, though, is the type of sci-fi I enjoy.
Yeah, and hopefully we can get some more stuff like this, because it's very good.
Oh my gosh. Like, I was, like, inspired. I'm like, I want to write a story like this, but, like, how am I going to do that, you know?
Yeah, I am not smart enough, and I like to write.
No, but, man. Really a shame that this film never got made.
Same.
It hurts me, I might dare say. It is my Jodorowsky's Dune. Like, it is that one where I think, man, what could have happened? Now, Jodorowsky's Dune, I'm like, that shit was never going to get made. Now, this one could have. That's the thing. That's what hurts the most. I think this movie could have been made if they had played their dice a little differently. You know?
Agreed.
I mean, you know, you were saying a while back, it's the downfall of Carruth is that I was just gonna say, I think his downfall was he just aimed too high, and he wasn't prepared for the reality of Hollywood.
Yeah, and then
ego stuff,
personal life, and he needs. I hope if you ever hear this, I hope you get the help you need, because we love you. But yeah, I mean, and you know, just some people are iconoclast, and that's it. I've made my peace with it. Maybe, like I said, maybe we'll see it in some carnation someday. But I hope that at the very least, it inspires another filmmaker to do something creative like this.
I mean, you know, it's kind of like you know, it's basically like art house Spielberg. You know, if I could really call the tone, like, first part is like, you know, it's basically, like I said, Close Encounters on acid, pretty much, because, you know, guy finds thing, becomes obsessed with it, basically destroys his own life as he tries to figure it out, and then, you know, they end very differently. This Absolutely. Is like, it feels very much like a love letter to those movies.
Oh yeah, I mean, even in the mock preview he did, he sliced in Indiana Jones.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
You know, I
think there was, like, scenes from Contact. Never seen it, but I read the book, and I wasn't a fan of it. I mean, I love Carl Sagan. I do love Cosmos, but it's one of those just. It's one of those kind of like Isaac Asimov. The ideas are better than the actual story.
Yep, I'm with you. I agree.
But yeah. So yeah, but A Topiary manages to do both, and it took a long time. In Kyle, there were moments I was like, "Geez, man, really not getting cut a break there for a minute."
Yeah.
But I'm glad I'm glad you joined me here, Al.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to the next one, whatever you want to talk about.
I'm probably gonna let you take a break for a bit before we do a next one. I mean, I have an idea, but I have some ideas, but I haven't really settled on one yet. But yeah, no. Thanks for talking about A Topiary with me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. See you later, everyone.
If you want to, real quick before we leave, if you want to talk about your social media or anything like that, but you can share that.
Yeah, it's Kyle Jonathan on Facebook. I'm pretty free with accepting friend requests. I don't really do anything else, but I write for the Movie Sleuth out of Michigan. Have a really good crew there. We get quite a lot of traffic. Mostly I cover cult cinema and erotic thrillers. That's kind of my specialty, but I do everything.
Yeah, I saw your new profile picture was of
Fatal Attraction.
Fatal Attraction.
Yeah, because I actually just published a review today of the new Fatal Attraction series that Amazon did.
Just to go on a little side tangent, I never felt bad for Michael Douglas's character.
No, absolutely not. And the show starts with him getting out of jail on parole for killing her. So they switch it up a little bit.
That's good.
And so it's a mystery. It's a mystery figuring out if he did do it or if somebody else did it, kind of thing. It's pretty good.
No, I mean his family didn't deserve to go through that, but I'm like, I don't feel bad for this guy.
No, absolutely not. The original ending was so much cooler. The original ending, she kills herself trying to like implicate him in it, and basically the studios were like, nope, that's too dark, and so they went with his wife killing her or whatever. So.
But yeah, no. But yeah, thanks for joining me. If you wanna check out my stuff, I'm on Twitter and Goodreads and Letterboxd. So you're on Letterboxd as well. I remember.
Oh yep. Just the Kyle_M. I put all my stuff from Movie Sleep on there just so I have multiple places to keep it. Yeah, give me a follow, give me a read anytime.
All right, yeah, no, there's some other stuff I'd love to talk with you about at some point. I'll let you know about that. But yeah, thanks for coming on and talking A Topiary with me. It was fun. It was
awesome,
worth
man.
the wait, man.
Absolutely, take it easy
and take care of yourself, man. You're always like getting like hurt. I don't want to like.
Yeah, I've been wearing my heat pad the entire time on my.
Well, I mean, I don't want. I know you're like kind of private, but just like take care of yourself. Is all I'm saying.
Yeah, I will.
Kept getting hurt and sick and stuff. I'm like, take care of yourself.
Yep.
All right, you take care, man. And
take it
everyone,
easy.
Take care, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.